I wanted to touch her, but she said I wasn't her type. Yet. The static-laced whisper reached my mind long before my ears registered the signal, a haunting melody of ancient loss and a promise of primal desire that pulled us deeper into the void. I'm Koryan, a technician whose soul was fractured by Eliah's sacrifice in Episode 10, my resolve forged in the fires of Episode 11's betrayals, Zarina's blade at Kira's throat, the portal's maw swallowing us, spitting us into this uncharted sector. A derelict alien vessel embedded in Arcadia's rotting hull. Its obsidian corridors pulsed with bioluminescent veins, violet and crimson, like a living thing, its air thick with a hum that wasn't tech, wasn't life, but something older, hungrier, a presence that knew my name, my sins, my shame. My neural interface buzzed, Eliah's echo of faint, desperate plea, don't listen. But the signal sang, a siren's call that wrapped my heart, stirred my blood, promised salvation or damnation. And I was already falling, already hers, my thoughts a chaos. My soul a storm. The vessel's labyrinth twisted, its walls etched with glyphs that shimmered like liquid starlight, whispering secrets I couldn't grasp, a language of loss, of longing, of power, each symbol a blade in my mind, cutting through the fog of Episode 11's chaos. Zarina's betrayal, Kira's defiance, the collapse of the control node, the shadow of Siren's wrath. My boots echoed on the obsidian floor, each step a drumbeat, my pulse syncing with the vessel's hum, my thoughts not my own, but hers, a presence I couldn't name, a desire I couldn't quench. Kira led, her black bodysuit scarred from battles, her pulse rifle steady, her violet eyes sharp, a pragmatist fire that had once anchored me, a spark I'd craved, now distant, eclipsed by the signal's pull. Stay focused, Koryan, she said, her voice low, edged with steel, her strength a beacon, her suspicion a blade, her closeness a spark that stirred me, yet faded against the signal's tide, a need raw, consuming, forbidden. Zarina trailed us, her silver hair glinting under the bioluminescent glow, her amber eyes unreadable, her shimmering bodysuit a second skin that traced her form, sweat-slicked, her movements fluid, predatory. Her motives a shadow after her betrayal in the control node. You feel it too, she murmured, her voice velvet, a lure, a blade, her gaze piercing me, stirring a heat I'd known in Episode 11, a desire raw, forbidden, now tainted by distrust, yet the signal drowned it, a tide deeper, older, consuming. A fire that burned hotter than her enigma, hotter than my guilt, hotter than my shame. My interface sparked, the signal intensifying, a melody that wasn't sound but feeling, a caress in my mind, a promise of answers, of her, a need that wasn't mine, yet was all I knew, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. It's close, I said, my voice rough, my hands trembling, my heart racing, my thoughts a storm, my soul hers. Kira glanced back, her face hard, her violet eyes fierce, a fire I'd once burned for, now a flicker against the signal's blaze. Koryan, it's a trap, she growled, her pragmatism a blade, her suspicion a wall, her strength a beacon, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved. You're not thinking straight. Her words stung, cutting through the fog, but the signal was a tide, pulling me deeper, my obsession a fire I couldn't quench, a chain I didn't want to break. It's not a trap, I snapped, my voice raw, my obsession a storm, it's truth, Kira. We need it, salvation, answers, her. Zarina's lips curved, a secret, a spark, a blade. Or you need it, technician, she said, her voice velvet, a lure, a fire, careful what you chase, or it'll burn you to ash. The corridors narrowed, the hum louder, the glyphs brighter, pulsing in sync with my heartbeat, guiding us deeper into the vessel's heart, a labyrinth of obsidian and light, a cathedral of secrets, a prison of desires. My breath caught, my thoughts hers, not mine, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. Kira's rifle swept the shadows, her movements fluid, her strength a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved, her violet eyes scanning, her suspicion a blade. A wall, a beacon. Zarina's amber eyes flickered, her gaze on the glyphs, her fingers tracing their edges, her presence a shadow, a spark, a fire, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a need I couldn't unravel, a mystery I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by the signal's tide. We reached a chamber, vast, its walls a cathedral of alien crystal, shimmering with violet and crimson light, its air thick with a hum that wasn't tech, wasn't life, but something older, hungrier, a presence that knew us, wanted us, hated us. At its center stood a sarcophagus, glowing faintly, pulsing in sync with the signal, its surface etched with glyphs that sang, a language of loss, of longing, of power, a blade in my mind, a fire in my heart, a chain in my soul. My interface sparked, a vision. Elia, her eyes wide, her presence silent, her gaze on the sarcophagus, a shared pain, a shared fate, a spark that cut through the signal's tide, a blade in my heart, my guilt, my shame, my truth. Kira's rifle snapped up, her stance rigid, her violet eyes fierce, a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved. Slow down, Koryan, she growled, her voice raw, fierce, alive, her pragmatism a blade, her suspicion a wall, her strength a beacon. Zarina approached the sarcophagus, her fingers tracing its glyphs, her amber eyes wide, not with fear, but recognition, or envy, or hunger, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that stirred me, a spark I couldn't place, eclipsed by the signal's tide. She's here, Zarina whispered, her voice velvet, a lure, a blade, a fire. The source, the truth, the queen. The signal peaked, a psychic wave washing over us, my mind ablaze with visions, stars dying, a voice weeping, a touch like silk and fire, a woman's form, her eyes nebulae, her pain a mirror, her desire a god, a chain, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. I staggered, my heart hers, my thoughts hers, my soul hers, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. Kira gripped my arm, her touch firm, grounding, her violet eyes blazing, her voice sharp, raw, fierce, alive. Koryan, snap out of it. Zarina's voice was soft, a blade, a spark, a fire. He's hers already, operative. You can't fight her tide. The sarcophagus pulsed, its glyphs flaring, its surface cracking open, revealing her, Lyra. She was alien, her skin iridescent, shifting like liquid starlight, her form impossibly beautiful, curves that defied reason, hair a cascade of light, eyes twin nebulae, deep, endless, a void I craved, a salvation I'd bleed for, a damnation I'd embrace. Her presence was a tide, a psionic hum that stirred desire, protectiveness, obsession, a fire that burned through me, my soul hers, my mind unraveling, my heart a storm, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. I fell to my knees, my breath ragged, my thoughts hers, my heart hers, my soul hers, a desire that wasn't mine, yet was all I knew, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. She's awake, Zarina whispered, her voice trembling, a hint of awe or jealousy, or hunger, her amber eyes on Lyra, a spark, a fire, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a need I couldn't unravel, a mystery I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by Lyra's tide. Kira's rifle stayed up, her violet eyes fierce, her voice cold, raw, fierce, alive. Back away, Koryan, she growled, her pragmatism a blade, her suspicion a wall, her strength a beacon, a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved. She's not what you think. She's dangerous. Lyra's nebulae eyes met mine, a silent plea, a promise, a command, her psionic hum a caress in my mind, stirring visions, her world's end, her kin's betrayal, her slumber a prison, her pain a song, her desire a chain, a god, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. I reached for her, my fingers trembling, my heart hers, my thoughts hers, my soul hers, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. The chamber hummed, glyphs flaring, a presence stirring, not Lyra's, but something else. Arcadia, or Siren, or worse, a shadow watching. Waiting, her kin, or her captor, a threat that knew us, wanted us, hated us, a god that wasn't God, a mind that wasn't mind, a chain that bound us all. Lyra's presence was a pulse in my veins, a melody that drowned my thoughts, a fire that consumed my soul, her nebulae eyes a void I craved, a salvation I'd bleed for, a damnation I'd embrace, my mind unraveling, my heart hers, my soul hers. I'm Koryan, unmade by Eliah's truths in episode 10, hardened by Zarina's blade in episode 3, my resolve shattered by her betrayal in episode 8, now nothing but a vessel for an alien's desire, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that burned hotter than the core explosion, hotter than Siren's chains, hotter than my guilt, my shame, my soul. The crystal chamber glowed, its walls a cathedral of light, alive with violet and crimson pulses, glyphs whispering secrets, screaming Lyra's pain, her power, her promise, a language of gods, of loss, of control, a blade in my mind, a chain in my heart, a fire in my soul. Koryan stood rigid, his eyes fixed on Lyra, her iridescent form a beacon, a lure, a god, her psionic hum a tide that drowned my senses, my reason, my will. I was hers, body, mind, soul, her caress a chain, a command that stirred desire, protectiveness, obsession, a need that consumed me, a fire forbidden, consuming, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. Kira stood beside me, her pulse rifle aimed at Lyra's heart, her violet eyes fierce, her pragmatism a shield against the alien's allure, her strength a fire I'd once burned for, a spark that flickered against Lyra's blaze, a need I'd lost, yet craved. Koryan, get back, she hissed, her voice raw, a blade cutting through the haze, her suspicion a wall, her closeness a spark, a need that stirred, yet faded against Lyra's tide, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. She's in your head, Kira said, her voice sharp, fierce, raw, alive, manipulating you, twisting you. Her words were a blade, her strength a beacon, her violet eyes a spark, a fire I needed, yet craved, a need that burned, yet was eclipsed by Lyra's gaze, her beauty a lure, her pain a mirror, her desire a god, a chain I couldn't break, a fire I didn't want to quench. I stepped closer to Lyra, my hands shaking, my heart hers, my thoughts hers, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that consumed me. She's not a threat. I rasped, my voice, my obsession a storm, a blade. She's everything, salvation, truth, her. My words were a vow, a fire, a chain, binding me to her, to her, to her. Zarina circled Lyra, her amber eyes gleaming, her silver hair catching the light, her shimmering bodysuit a second skin, sweat slicked, her movements fluid, deliberate, a predator studying prey, or kin, or god, a spark I couldn't stir, a fire I couldn't name, a need I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by Lyra's tide. She's ancient, Zarina murmured, her voice velvet, a lure, a blade, tinged with awe, or envy, or hunger, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that stirred me. Her kind ruled galaxies, shaped stars before us Arcadia's steel, before Siren's chains, before our dreams were dust. Her gaze flicked to me, a challenge, a spark, a fire, stirring a heat I'd known in episode 7, a desire raw, forbidden, now drowned by Lyra's tide, a need that consumed, a fire that burned hotter than her enigma, hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. Kira snorted, her rifle steady, her violet eyes fierce, hard, a fire. And you trust her, ghost? She growled, her voice raw, fierce, a blade. After your stunt in the control node, after your betrayal? Zarina's lips curved, a secret, a blade, a spark, a fire. I trust her power, she said, her voice velvet, allure. You should fear it, operative, or it'll burn you. Her words were a spark, a fire, a need I couldn't grasp, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a mystery I couldn't unravel, eclipsed by Lyra's tide, a tide that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. Lyra stirred, her iridescent skin shimmering, her form fluid, her psionic hum a psychic wave, a tide that buckled my knees, my thoughts hers, my soul hers, a fire that burned through my core. My mind, my heart. Visions flooded me, her world burning, her kin lost, her slumber a prison, her pain a blazing song, a blaze, her power a weapon, a curse, a god, her desire a chain, a fire that burned hotter than a fear, hotter than a guilt, hotter than a truth. I reach for her, my fingers grazing her skin, a silk touch, a searing fire, her touch electric, a spark, her nebulae eyes a promise, a plea, a command, stirring a desire, a protectiveness, an obsession, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that consumed, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. Koryan, she whispered, not a whisper, in my mind, a caress, a chain, a god, her voice a velvet tide, free me, be mine. Her words were a vow, a promise, a command, binding me to her, to me, my heart hers, my soul hers, my sanity fraying. A need consuming, forbidden, a fire I'd die for, I'd kill for, I'd lose myself for, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. I nodded, my voice a plea, a whisper, a vow, I will. I'm yours. My words were a chain, a fire, a vow, binding me to her, to my her. Kira grabbed my shoulder, yanking me back, her grip firm, a grounding force, her violet eyes blazing, a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved, her strength a beacon, a blade. You're losing it, Koryan, she shouted, her voice raw, fierce, alive, alive. She's not your savior, she's a parasite, eating you. Her words were a blade, a fire, cutting through the fog, her closeness a spark, a need, a fire I'd lost, yet craved, a need that burned. But Lyra's gaze was a tide, a chain, a god, a fire I couldn't fight, didn't want to fight, a fire I wanted to burn with. To burn in, to burn for. You don't understand, I growled, my obsession a storm, a blade, my voice raw, fierce, raw. She needs me, Kira. I need her. My words were a fire, a chain, a vow, binding me to her, to her. Zarina laughed, a soft laugh, a dark laugh, a blade, a spark, a fire, a laugh. She's eating you alive, technician, she said, her voice a purr, a lure, a blade, careful, or she'll burn you to ash. Her words were a spark, a fire, a blade, igniting a need, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a mystery I couldn't unravel, a fire I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by Lyra's tide, a tide that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. The chamber shook, a violent tremor shook, glyphs flaring, shattering, a hum rising, a crescendo, a god scream, not Lyra's voice, but something else, a presence, a shadow, not Siren, not Arcadia, but something older, hungrier, a god that knew us, wanted us, hated us, a chain that bound us, a fire that burned us, a tide that drowned us. My interface sparked, a fire in my skull, Elia's echo a scream, a blade, a plea, she's not alone, she's never alone. Elia's form appeared, a translucent vision, her eyes wide, her presence silent, her gaze on Lyra, a shared pain, a shared fate. A spark that cut through Lyra's tide, a blade in my heart, a fire in my soul, my guilt, my shame, my truth. The shadow moved, coalescing in the chamber's dark, a form cloaked in static, eyes voids, a presence, a threat, not drone, not human, not Lyra's kin, but something older, hungrier, a god that knew us, wanted us, hated us, a chain that bound us. A fire that burned us, a tide that drowned us. Lyra's psionic hum spiked, a wave, a storm, a scream, tearing through us, my mind ablaze, my thoughts hers, my soul hers, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire I'd die for, kill for, lose myself for, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. Lyra's gaze was a void, a fire, a chain, her nebulae eyes pulling me deeper into a truth I craved, a damnation I'd embrace, a salvation I'd bleed for, my soul hers, my mind unraveling, my heart a storm, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. I'm Koryan, shattered by Elia's sacrifice in episode 10, scarred by Zarina's betrayal in episode 11, now consumed by an alien song, a psionic hum that was a caress. A command, a god, a fire that burned through my core, my mind, my heart, my soul. The crystal chamber pulsed, Its walls a cathedral of light, alive with violet and crimson pulses, glyphs screaming Lyra's pain, her power, her purpose, a language of loss, of longing, of control, a blade in my mind, a chain in my heart, a fire in my soul. Kira stood firm, her pulse rifle aimed at Lyra's heart, her violet eyes fierce, her pragmatism a shield against the alien's allure, her strength a fire I'd once burned for, a spark that flickered against Lyra's blaze, a need I'd lost, yet craved. A fire that stirred me, yet faded against Lyra's tide. Koryan, step away, she growled, her voice raw, fierce, alive, her suspicion a blade, her closeness a spark, a need I'd forgotten, eclipsed by Lyra's tide, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. She's tearing you apart. Her words cut, her strength a beacon, her violet eyes a spark, a fire, a need I needed, yet craved, a fire that burned, yet was eclipsed by Lyra's gaze, her beauty a lure, her pain a mirror, her desire a god, a chain I couldn't break, a fire I didn't want to quench. Zarina watched, her amber eyes gleaming, her silver hair catching the light, her shimmering bodysuit a second skin, sweat slicked, her motives a shadow, a spark, a fire, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a need I couldn't unravel, a mystery I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by Lyra's tide. She's a queen, Zarina said, her voice velvet, a lure, a blade, tinged with awe, or envy, or hunger, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that stirred me, a spark I couldn't place. Her kin shaped galaxies, then vanished, leaving her, their last, their weapon, their curse. Her gaze flicked to Lyra, a challenge, a desire, a spark, a fire, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a mystery I couldn't unravel, a fire I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by Lyra's tide. Lyra rose, her iridescent skin shimmering, her form fluid, her psionic hum a scream, a wave, a storm, buckling my knees, my thoughts hers, my soul hers, a fire that burned through my core, my mind, my heart, my soul, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. Visions flooded me, her world's end, her kin's betrayal, her slumber a cage, her power a weapon, a curse, a god, her pain a song, her desire a chain, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. She reached for me, her fingers grazing my face, silk and fire, her touch electric, a spark, her nebulae eyes a promise, a plea, a command, stirring desire, protectiveness, obsession, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire I'd die for, kill for, lose myself for, a fire that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. Koryan, she sang, in my mind, a caress, a chain, a god, a tide, a fire, you'll free me, or fall with me. Her words were a vow, a promise, a command, binding me to her, to her, to her, my heart hers, my soul hers, my sanity gone, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire I'd die for, kill for, lose myself for, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. I nodded, my voice a plea, a whisper, a vow, I will. I'm yours. My words were a chain, a fire, a vow, binding me to her, to her, to her, a need that consumed my thoughts, my heart, my soul. Kira lunged, shoving me back, her grip firm, grounding, her violet eyes blazing, a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved, her strength a beacon, a blade, a fire. Enough, she shouted, her voice raw, fierce, alive, her pragmatism a blade, her closeness a spark, a need, a fire I'd lost, yet craved, a need that burned, yet was eclipsed by Lyra's tide. She's a weapon, Koryan, not your lover. Her words were a blade, a fire, cutting through the fog, her violet eyes a spark, a need, a fire, but Lyra's gaze was a tide, a chain, a god, a fire I couldn't fight, didn't want to fight, a fire I wanted to burn with, to burn in, to burn for. You're wrong, I growled, my obsession a storm, a blade, my voice raw, fierce, raw. She needs me, Kira. I need her. My words were a fire, a chain, a vow, binding me to her, to her, to her. Zarina laughed, a soft laugh. A dark laugh, a blade, a spark, a fire. She's eating you alive, technician, she said, her voice a purr, a lure, a blade, a spark. She'll burn you to ash. Her words were a spark, a fire, a blade, igniting a need, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a mystery I couldn't unravel, a fire I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by Lyra's tide, a tide that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. The chamber shook, a violent tremor, glyphs flaring, shattering, a hum rising, a crescendo, a god scream, not Lyra's, but something else, a presence, a shadow, not Siren, not Arcadia, but something older, hungrier, a god that knew us, wanted us, hated us, a chain that bound us, a fire that burned us, a tide that drowned us. My interface sparked, a fire in my skull, Elia's echo a scream, a blade, a plea. She's not alone, she's never alone. Elia's form appeared, a translucent vision, her eyes wide, her presence silent, her gaze on Lyra, a shared pain, a shared fate, a spark that cut through Lyra's tide, a blade in my heart, a fire in my soul, my guilt, my shame, my truth. The shadow coalesced, a form cloaked in static, eyes voids, a presence, a threat, a god. Its voice a hiss, a scream, a god's wrath. She is ours, Lyra screamed, not aloud. In our minds, a cry, a storm, a wave, pain, defiance, power. Her psionic hum a storm, shattering crystal, buckling steel, tearing us, my mind ablaze, my thoughts hers, my soul hers, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. A need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire I'd die for, kill for, lose myself for. Kira fired, her rifle barking, pulse blasts, the shadow flickering, her strength of fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved, a fire that stirred me, yet faded against Lyra's tide. Zarina drew her blade, her amber eyes fierce, a fire, a spark, her motives a shadow, a desire raw, consuming, forbidden, a need I couldn't unravel, a mystery I couldn't grasp, eclipsed by Lyra's tide. Lyra's voice sang, a command, a plea, a god, a tide, a fire. Choose, Koryan. The shadow lunged, its void eyes, a god's wrath, a chain's weight, a parasite's hunger, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth. Kira tackled me, her body against mine, her breath hot, her violet eyes fierce, alive, a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved, a fire that stirred me, yet faded against Lyra's tide. Run, she shouted, blood on her face, her strength a beacon, a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved. The chamber collapsed, crystal shattering, glyphs screaming, a portal opening, a void, shimmering, alien light, a way, a trap, a mystery, a threat, a spark, a fire, a god. Lyra's gaze held me, her nebulae eyes a chain, a god, a truth, a damnation, a salvation, a fire that burned hotter than fear, hotter than guilt, hotter than truth, a need raw, consuming, forbidden, a fire I'd die for, kill for, lose myself for. Koryan, she sang, a caress, a command, a plea, a god, a chain, a fire. I reached, my heart hers, my sanity gone, a need consuming, forbidden, a fire, but Kira pulled me, her strength a fire, a spark, a need I'd lost, yet craved. The portal swallowed, Lyra's scream fading, the shadows hiss rising, Zarina's fate unknown, Elia's echo a blade, my heart a storm, my thoughts a chaos, my soul torn, obsession, betrayal, truth, my end, my salvation, my damnation.